What is up, you guys? This is Eric Heads for the Win, and I wanted to talk about this article I came across from Game Rant, and it's titled 10 Common Misconceptions About Dark Souls. So we're going to go through them, all 10 of them, and just kind of react and see if I agree or disagree or just what are my thoughts on them. I hope you're all doing well. Be sure to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy, alright? So let's get into this. So this article was written by Eric Petrovich, and they started off basically by saying that the Dark Souls series is, for a lack of a better term, intimidating. That players entering the world of Dark Souls for the first time go in with a ton of preconceived notions. Which is very true. You know, Dark Souls and Souls-like games have the reputation for being difficult games, producing these brutal experiences, right? We upload content, we talk about the bosses being so difficult, the ones that gave us the most trouble. They see the articles, they see these videos, they see us playing these games and talking about it on Twitter and other social media. And I'm sure they think to themselves like, wow, that sounds very difficult. How do you guys do it? And I do get those kinds of opinions towards me and towards me playing these games. They'll often ask me like, how do you do it? And it's because they're thinking what they're thinking, right? And what the reputation of these games tells them, and that is that they're very difficult. And that leads us right into number 10 of this list. The writer here says this is the main misconception of Dark Souls, and that is that Dark Souls, Sekiro, and Bloodborne are too hard. The writer explains here that yes, this is the main misconception, that all From Software titles are too hard. And the reason for that is that these games don't hold the player's hand, which is true. They really don't. You kind of are thrown in there, especially your first time, when you really don't know what the heck you're doing. You got to figure it out yourself. It doesn't hold your hand. But that's actually part of the charm, which is also true, that overcoming these odds and overcoming, failing and dying over and over, that's what makes these games what they are and what Dark Souls is all about. And getting good. I mean, it feels good. They also say here that people who claim the Dark Souls games are the hardest games ever made have clearly never played games like Contra, Ghosts and Goblins, and Ninja Gaiden, which I also agree with. Those games growing up were very difficult. So yeah, it could be that where they just don't play enough challenging games to compare and to fully understand like, hey, these aren't that bad. Anyone who's played these games knows that it's a matter of just getting better, leveling up, specifically with the Dark Souls series, Bloodborne. You can level up your stats, you can get better, you can get stronger, and there's ways of going about it that you can make it easier. Believe it or not. Number 9 says the narrative doesn't make sense. So yeah, this is definitely a misconception that's thrown out there. And it's not that the games don't make sense and the narratives don't make sense. It's just that they're not really in your face. There's lore, right? And they even say here in the article that the series' lore is sprawling, vast, complex, but it's also hidden away. You have to look for it. You got to search for it. It's interesting stuff. Of course, it's not in your face during the actual game. You got to read the dialogue from NPCs and hear them speak, and you got to read text that's on items. Stuff like that is all we're really given up front to get a sense of this world. It does come across as, oh, I'm just here to kill. And that's what it says in the article, that I don't know why I'm here, but I'm here to kill these things and I got to get through the game and I just got to not die. And for somebody coming into that, maybe expecting a narrative, they're probably going to feel disappointed, or they're going to hear about it and have that misconception that, oh, there's no story, it makes no sense, it's not good. But then, yeah, if they were to give the games a chance, they would then understand, okay, there is a story here. It's just I have to look for it. That's all. You just gotta, look for it. Moving on to number 8. Animation locking is unintuitive design. Now, let me say this before I read it. I've never heard anyone say this. As far as I know, I don't remember ever hearing this opinion or misconception But we're going to read a couple sentences here. It says that instead of using quick jabs that one can easily duck out of, players are forced to watch an entire attack play out, even if it doesn't connect. However, this forces the player to consider things much more strategically. Very true. Will another swing connect, or will it leave me open for a counter? Basically, you can't cancel the animation. So even if you're doing it, it doesn't feel natural to, I guess, somebody looking in, or just thinking about animation locking in general. I honestly haven't thought about this too much. I do know that there's certain games I'm able to cancel moves, and that always impresses me. I always think that's really cool, depending on the game. It's nice to have that option, like, oh, I can cancel this move, because there's been many times where I've just been stuck in animation, especially when I'm doing like a heavy attack. Once I hit that heavy attack, I'm committed. That thing's going and there's nothing I can do about it. And yeah, it does leave you vulnerable. It does leave you open for that enemy to counter you. So it makes for different gameplay because I'm having to think, okay, do I want to do this attack now? Do I want to wait? I got to wait for my openings on the boss and let them do their attacks, right? Enemies as well. It's like sometimes they're committed. They're swinging away 2-3 times and that's their pattern. They're stuck with it. So I'm waiting for an opening. And that in turn, I think makes the games easier because we're looking for patterns. So I look at it that way. That's the first knee-jerk reaction I had when I saw this one on the list was like, wait a minute. They don't realize this actually makes the games easier. It might seem harder looking in, and maybe that's the misconception, like, oh, it's not natural, it's not intuitive, it doesn't feel right, I gotta wait for these things to play out, these moves and everything. It's like, yeah, that's true, but remember, the bosses gotta have their moves play out as well. And once they do play out, that's when you have your opening to then attack. So it goes both ways. Does it suck not being able to cancel? Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes you do. You regret, you have regrets like, oh, I shouldn't have made that move. Now I'm stuck and now I'm dead. It happens, but it causes you to think differently the next time around. Like, okay, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to wait for a different opening, or I'm going to really wait till I have enough time to execute this move. It changes the tactics. And that's what I think I love about these games is that the strategy and how you read the room and how you look at the enemies, you got to think to yourself, okay, am I going to commit to these certain moves, or am I going to play it safe? Am I going to hit once or twice, then dodge and back off? It causes you to be more cautious and not get greedy. And that's really the trick to beating these games, is to not be greedy. Let's move on to number 7, though. This one's interesting. And I've definitely heard this one. Number 7 says, Dark Souls 2 is the worst video game ever made. Okay, so I haven't exactly heard worst video game ever made, but I've definitely heard worst Souls game. And that opinion comes from Souls vets. People have played all these games and they've been playing Souls for a long time. So when they say that, maybe it comes across to everyone else that this game is terrible, worst game ever, it should have never existed. It gets to that territory when in actuality, they're basically saying, oh, it's the worst Souls game, which could mean, oh, it's just the worst of the best franchise I ever played, right? Because a lot of Souls players really hold these games dear to their heart. And to say, oh, Dark Souls 2 is the worst one, it doesn't really mean worst game ever. But I could see how outsiders, people who don't know the series, they don't know anything about Dark Souls 2, they could hear those criticisms and think, wow, this is really a bad game. I should just skip it altogether. That makes sense. So yeah, that's definitely one that we will consider as, yeah, that's a misconception for sure. And it's a little dramatic. Worst video game ever made? Come on, there's way worse games out there. Way worse games. But yeah, that's a good one. I would definitely, if I made this list, I would have definitely put it in there. Number 6, the series is responsible for the Souls-like label. Now this one's a little weird. Let me read this to you guys. It says, Dark Souls is considered a landmark in gaming where one company decided to stop holding players' hands and present a classic RPG experience in modern times. Many games have been inspired by the dark, foreboding world of that series, but it certainly wasn't the first of its kind. Before the term Souls-like came around, people used the term Metroidvania instead. And it wasn't From Software's idea to coin a new term for something that already exists. So I'm struggling with this one a little bit because it's comparing it to Metroidvania, saying that if it wasn't Souls-like, we would call it Metroidvania, which I don't agree with at all. I would have just called it an action RPG, but that's just me, because when I think of Metroidvania, that's very unique to that experience. It's backtracking, it's opening up a map, clearing the map, finding where to expand the map, bringing it up multiple times, getting abilities, and then backtracking to use those abilities on stuff I couldn't do before. So doors I couldn't open, maybe water that I couldn't swim in, areas I couldn't get to because I needed a double jump or something like that. Souls-like games don't really do that for the most part. You can backtrack in order to farm or in order to maybe clear a optional boss or something like that. Sometimes it's a matter of your level was too low at first, so you're going to go back and fight an enemy that was too strong. I get that. Like, I see where backtracking comes in there. But overall, I just feel like this one's a little bit strange. I see where they're coming from also, I guess, when it comes to not holding your hand, because Metroidvania can be looked at that way. It's sort of, hey, you're in this world, you're unlocking the map, and you're figuring out where to go. You get lost a lot. And then also, it's up to you to understand, like, once you get an ability, you have to know where to use it and how to use it and how to beat bosses with it. It's not exactly told to you. It's just something that clicks in your mind, like, oh, I just got this thing, now I can use it for this, and oh, what else did I miss before? I can go back and use it there. I play a lot of Metroidvanias, and I don't look at the Souls series as like, oh, this is what a Metroidvania would be without the Souls-like label. Like, I just don't make that connection at all. So I don't feel this is a misconception. If people say the series is responsible for Souls-like, I agree with them. So it's a little interesting, this one. I do see where they're coming from, like I said, but overall, this is probably the one I don't agree with. And I've never ever heard people say, well, yeah, if it wasn't a Souls-like, it would be Metroidvania. I've never heard that. They're very different to me. I've seen games that bring them together. Hollow Knight is pictured right here, of course. That's definitely one. It's both. It has both Souls-like and Metroidvania aspects to it. Souls-like, to me, took action RPG and gave it a twist and gave it these certain mechanics and certain ways of playing it that makes it stand out and be something different than what I've experienced before. And I've been playing Metroidvania since I was a kid. I played Metroid. So, yeah. Interesting one right here for sure. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments. If you're going to comment on any one of these, comment on this one. I'm curious what you think. But yeah, let's move on to the next one. Number 5. Every boss can one-shot the player. Wow. So it says, in line with the perception of difficulty in the Dark Souls series is the perception of bosses. Bosses in the series are frightening and complex. That's true. Each with their own movesets and style of combat, but none of them are unfair. Okay, so I agree with that. There have been a couple bosses that I know I fought in the past where I felt like, man, some luck is involved. Don't get me wrong. I've definitely felt that with certain bosses. Dark Souls 2, there's a couple that come to mind, especially, gosh, with that frame rate and stuff, you know, Bloodborne as well. Like sometimes you just felt like, man, I just need some luck, damn it. But yeah, in reality, you just had to figure it out. Of course, you had to time things better. If it was, you know, the frames, you had to dodge quicker and things like that. Were they unfair? Probably not at the end of the day, but when you're in the heat of the moment, it can feel that way sometimes. You just feel like, man, these guys, I don't know what to do. But of course, the more you play, the more you figure it out. So yeah, it is a misconception that these bosses are just so overpowered. They one-shot you, they kill you so fast. And somebody looking in from the outside, they might see these boss fights on video. They might see the struggles that people are having, and maybe they are dying pretty quick. It might not be one shot, but it might look that way. So they might look at it and think, wow, that seems so hard. Like, how did you die so fast? They might just be overwhelmed by that. Like, wow, that's too difficult. That's a one-shot kill. I don't want no parts of that. So that could create a misconception if somebody's dying super fast because, hey, maybe they're underleveled, right? There's always factors. You could be underleveled. You can go in there with not enough health, no flasks. You just walk in there and get absolutely wrecked. And that's happened to me. That's happened to you. I'm sure it happens. And so looking in from the outside, somebody could definitely look at that and think, wow. So yeah, this is a good one to list. I'd say that is a misconception. I think people do put these bosses up there like they're so difficult because they look difficult. Sometimes the way they're designed, the scope of them and how much ground they cover, the area that they're in, maybe there's a bunch of fire everywhere and it just comes across as intimidating. I could totally see that. So yeah, I agree with that. This is definitely a misconception out there for sure. Number 4 is PvP related. It says host advantage is to blame for online deaths. That's not true, apparently. That PvP is not host based. It's basically the Dark Souls servers. So if anyone, it says right here, if anyone you see online is complaining about host advantage, they're just salty. So there you go with that. I haven't really heard too much of this because, again, I don't play PvP and I don't really know if outsiders to the genre and to the series care about PvP like that to even have a misconception. I don't think I've really heard much about it. I think people just focus on the single player and focus on that difficulty. So yeah, I guess within the Souls series, within the people who do play it, this is a misconception for them. So yeah, I guess they, threw one in there for the actual players of the game. Number 3 says, and it's not efficient to invade others for souls. So that's another misconception, I guess, that's going around. It says it has led many players to consider online invasions as a waste of time. So they think that it's not efficient to invade others. I don't think that. I just don't do it. I ain't really in the mood to be invading because I hate people invading me. I'm not a big fan of it. So I myself don't really have misconceptions. My only thought is like, I'm just not that interested. But maybe for others looking in, they're thinking, oh, it's a waste of time. I would like to do it, but it's a waste of time. So maybe that's a thing. But yeah, apparently that's not true. You can get a huge percentage of their souls. It says right there. So there you go. Number 2, heavy armor is necessary to avoid a quick death. So let me read this. It says, typically in RPGs, heavy armor is the most defensive option available to toughen up a soldier and give major defense to a tank. So I'm assuming they're going to talk about fat roll. That's what I'm assuming. In Dark Souls, though, armor values are almost meaningless. They will reduce damage taken, but it's not significant enough to lose dodging effectiveness. Okay, so they're just focusing on the stats there. But here I see it. Fat roll says the more a player is burdened, the less effective their dodge rolls will be, sometimes called fat roll. So I knew that was coming. I freaking knew it. But yeah, I mean, I guess that is true. You don't necessarily have to have a bunch of heavy armor. You would think so, right? Like, oh, it's going to protect me and stuff. But yeah, it could get too heavy and your stats won't allow you to carry it. You'll be fat rolling everywhere. So yeah, there's that. But also, I mean, there's different builds. You can have builds where you're not wearing a lot of armor and you can be faster and you be just as efficient. So yeah, that's, I guess, a misconception that people have, maybe when they're first starting out, like me. I tend to go strength build. I always do. So yeah, I'm pretty sure at the beginning I had issues with this, and I know for a fact I was fat rolling. And to understand that and kind of get a grasp on the leveling system and what what stats mean what and all of that, it takes some time. So I don't think I necessarily had the misconception like, oh, I need more armor. I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. So it's more of that. But yeah, I could see that being an opinion maybe that people think going in. And number one, the Souls games was From Software's first major release. Oh, I'm sure there's people that think that. I always knew they had other games. I don't remember how I knew, I just did. And this, I just knew that, you know, Dark Souls and Demon Souls was the start of this, like the start of Souls, the start of this genre that we can call it now, and the Souls-like. I knew that, but I could totally see this as something people think, and that is a misconception. I've seen people say things like, you know, Sekiro's the first game. Like, I've seen some crazy opinions out there, like gamers that aren't really in the know. Or they would say something like they play Sekiro, right? And then they would say, oh, what was Dark Souls the same developer? You know, they'll like ask things like that, like they're not really sure. So yeah, this is probably best at number one as far as the misconceptions, because people do forget the other games, which, hey man, I'm probably guilty of that too. I haven't really played From Software's early stuff. I've just played the Souls stuff and Sekiro. So yeah, I'd say that's a misconception, that maybe the other games aren't good. They're too old. I haven't really given them a chance. So I guess I'm guilty of that one. But as far as Souls goes, I mean, yeah, I knew it wasn't the first, and but that doesn't mean everyone knows that. There's definitely people who don't know that. So yeah, that's the list. I thought this was a cool article to read. Definitely somebody here who has experience. That number 6 though, about the whole Souls-like label, that's probably the only one I didn't agree with. But maybe I was expanding on it in a different way that they didn't think of, and they're kind of just making it more simpler than I'm doing. But as far as the whole article goes, it was a good read. It was interesting. I've been noticing a lot of Souls articles lately, maybe in anticipation of Elden Ring. So it could be that. But yeah, I've noticed some articles floating around, and they can be interesting. So I figured if they are interesting, I will cover them and kind of go through them with you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with this list? Do you think they should add more to the list? Do you disagree? You disagree with me? I mean, that's always fun. Let me know in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video. All right, peace.